People remember the loud moments in a family, but sometimes the quiet ones do the most damage. The first time, my mother asked why Lily never came around anymore. I was standing in my kitchen, rinsing a coffee mug, and her voice sounded almost hurt. Not angry, not accusing, just soft enough to make me pause. "She's our granddaughter," Mom said. "She should be with us for the holidays." That was the odd part. Because for 8 years, my parents had been very careful not to call Lily that. When I adopted her, she was 4 years old and still asked permission before opening a drawer. I brought her into my family slowly, the way you carry something fragile through a crowded room. At first, I thought my parents only needed time. My mother bought her a sweater. My father showed her where the cookies were. Everyone smiled in the right places. Then the little exceptions started. A family photo with just the real grandkids. A Christmas stocking without her name. A birthday invitation that somehow didn't include her until I asked. My mother always had a reason. She forgot, she misunderstood. Lily seemed shy. I was being sensitive. So when Mom suddenly began calling every week, asking whether Lily would come to Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, anything, I should have been relieved. Instead, I noticed what she never asked. She never asked how Lily was doing. She didn't ask what grade she was in, what books she liked, whether she still hated carrots, whether she had forgiven them. She only asked if Lily would be there. And every call ended the same way. "Aunt Carol keeps asking about her," Mom would say, like that explained the urgency. That was when I started wondering whether my parents missed my daughter, or whether they just needed her seen. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. I didn't say that to my mother. Not then. I only turned off the faucet and watched the water drip from the rim of the mug into the sink, one drop at a time. My mother kept talking on the other end, filling the silence the way she always did when she sensed she might lose control of a conversation. "She's getting older," she said. "Teenagers drift if you let them. You have to keep them close to family." Lily was 12, not quite a teenager, not quite a little girl. Old enough to know when a room changed because she walked into it. I looked toward the hallway, where her backpack was slumped by the door with one shoe beside it and one shoe under the bench. She had come home from school tired that day, quiet in the way she got when she was trying not to need anything. There was a permission slip on the counter for a winter concert. My parents didn't know about because they had never asked about school unless another relative was listening. "Mom," I said carefully, "when was the last time you called Lily just to talk to her?" The line went still for a second. Then my mother gave a small laugh. "Well, I don't want to intrude. You know how she is. How she is." That phrase had followed Lily for years. Shy, say, sensitive, difficult to read, hard to connect with. I said gently, always with enough concern to sound kind. But somehow, it always left Lily responsible for the distance other people created. I thought about the first Thanksgiving after the adoption was finalized. Lily had worn a yellow dress and carried a drawing she made for my parents, all 6 of us standing under a crooked rainbow. My mother thanked her, smiled, and set it on the kitchen counter beside the mail. Later, when we left, the drawing was still there, half covered by a grocery receipt. Lily noticed. She didn't mention it until we were in the car. "Maybe Grandma Evelyn forgot," she whispered. I told her maybe she did. For a long time, I survived my parents by turning cruelty into maybe. Maybe they needed time. Maybe they didn't understand adoption. Maybe they were awkward. Maybe they loved her quietly. But now, my mother was saying granddaughter like she had owned the word all along. And as she talked about Thanksgiving seating, about matching sweaters for the cousins, about how nice it would be to finally have everyone together, I realized something small and cold. She had already planned where Lily would stand in the photo. She just hadn't asked whether Lily wanted to be in it. By the next morning, my mother had sent 3 texts. The first one came before 7, while I was making Lily's lunch and trying to spread peanut butter without tearing the bread. "Don't forget to ask Lily about Thanksgiving. Your father would love to see her." The second came 20 minutes later. "Aunt Carol is doing the big table this year. Everyone will be there." The third came after Lily had already left for school. It would mean a lot if she didn't shut us out. I stood in the kitchen with my phone in my hand, reading that last sentence twice. Shut us out. It was a careful phrase, soft enough to sound wounded, sharp enough to put the blame where my mother wanted it. Lily had not shut anyone out. She had just stopped walking into places where she had to prove she belonged. I didn't answer right away. I wiped crumbs from the counter, rinsed Lily's cereal bowl, and moved through the morning like a person, trying not to touch a bruise. The house was quiet after she left. Her hoodie was still draped over the back of a chair. A purple hair tie sat beside the salt shaker. Normal things. Small signs that she lived here without needing permission. At my parents' house, she had never taken up space that easily. When Lily was younger, she used to pack before visits like she was going somewhere important. She would choose a dress, brush her hair twice, and ask whether Grandma Evelyn liked drawings or flowers better. Once, she spent an entire Saturday making a bracelet for my father from blue and gray thread because he always wore blue shirts. He said thank you when she gave it to him. He even smiled. The next week, I saw it sitting in the small dish near their front door, the place where my father kept coins, old keys, and receipts. Lily saw it too. Her eyes stayed on it for only a moment before she looked away. On the drive home, she asked if grown-ups wore bracelets. Some do, I said. She nodded like that explained it. That was how it went for years. Lily noticed everything, and I explained what I could without making the truth too heavy for her to carry. My parents never yelled at her. They never told her to leave. They just made sure she understood there were lines she should not cross. At birthday parties, my nephews sat beside my mother when candles were blown out. Lily stood with me near the back, holding her gift bag in both hands. At Christmas, the boys' names were written in glitter on stockings hanging from the mantel. Lily's gift was usually placed under the tree with mine, as if she were an attachment to my invitation. And every time I brought it up, my mother sounded surprised. Mariana, you're reading too much into this. Or she didn't seem upset. Or you know your father. He's not expressive. There was always a way to make the moment smaller. So when Mom's new version of herself appeared, I didn't trust it. Not fully. Not even when she called again that afternoon and sounded almost cheerful. I was thinking, she said, Lily can sit next to me at Thanksgiving. I was folding laundry in the living room. A stack of Lily's shirts rested on the couch beside me, most of them black now, a few with paint stains on the sleeves. My mother still thought she liked pink. That's new, I said. What is? You wanting her next to you. Another pause. Brief. Controlled. Well, I don't know why you'd say it like that. I picked up one of Lily's shirts and folded it slowly. Because she usually sits wherever there's space. That's not true. It is. My mother exhaled, and I could picture her standing in her kitchen, one hand on the counter, eyes narrowing at the wall calendar. She always became calmer when she was annoyed. That was how I knew. You know, she said, sometimes children decide they don't fit in, and then nothing anyone does is enough. I stopped folding. There it was again. Not direct. Not cruel enough to quote easily. Just a quiet turning of the room until Lily became the source of her own exclusion. She was 4 when this started, I said. My mother didn't answer right away. Then she said, I'm not going to argue about the past. I'm trying to move forward. Move forward meant stop naming it. Move forward meant bring Lily to Thanksgiving and smile in the picture. Move forward meant no one had to ask why an 8-year-old once cried in my car because Grandpa Richard introduced the cousins as his grandchildren and called her Mariana's little one. I told my mother I would talk to Lily. That was not a promise. It was only the safest way to end the call. When Lily came home from school, she dropped her backpack in the hallway and went straight to the refrigerator. She was taller now, all elbows and quiet expressions, with braces that made her smile more careful. I watched her pour juice into a glass and leave 1 inch at the top, the way she always did because she hated spilling. Grandma Evelyn asked about Thanksgiving, I said. Lily didn't turn around. She put the juice carton back first. Then she closed the refrigerator door. Do I have to go? The question was too quick, too practiced. No, I said. I just wanted to ask what you wanted. She leaned against the counter and stared into her glass. Is Aunt Carol going to be there? I had not mentioned Aunt Carol. Something in my chest tightened, not sharply, but enough to make me pay attention. Yes, I said. Why? Lily shrugged, but it didn't look casual. It looked like a door closing gently. Grandma Evelyn is nicer when Aunt Carol is there. She said it without anger. That was what stayed with me, not like an accusation, like a rule she had already learned. I didn't ask Lily to explain it right away. There were questions I wanted to ask, but I had learned that children who have been made uncomfortable by adults often answer too quickly when they think the adult needs something from them. So I only nodded and told her she didn't have to decide that night. She took her juice upstairs. A few minutes later, I heard her bedroom door close. The house settled around me in its usual evening sounds. The dishwasher clicked on. A car passed slowly outside. Somewhere upstairs, Lily's desk chair rolled across the floor, then stopped. I stood in the kitchen and looked at my phone. My mother had sent another message. Please don't let her avoid us again. It's important this year. Important this year. I read those words until they stopped looking normal. For 8 years, Lily's absence had been treated like a relief. If she didn't come, no one asked twice. If she stayed beside me at gatherings, no one pulled her into games or conversations. If she missed a holiday because she was sick or anxious or simply tired of being overlooked, my mother would say, maybe next time, with the easy tone of someone whose table had not changed. But now it was important, not because Lily had changed, because someone else was watching. I started doing what I had avoided for years. I went back through old messages. Not all at once. That would have felt too deliberate, too much like admitting I had known something was wrong and had let it keep happening. I began with the family group chat, scrolling past photos of cakes, school awards, Thanksgiving menus, and reminders about who was bringing rolls. There were dozens of messages about my nephews, Mason's soccer tournament, Eli's dentist appointment, their Halloween costumes, their stomach bugs, their report cards. My mother used heart emojis, little clapping hands, rows of exclamation points. She asked for pictures. She asked for updates. She asked whether they needed rides. For Lily, there were gaps. There was a message from me when she made honor roll. My mother responded 6 hours later with, "That's nice." There was a photo I sent of Lily holding a painting from school. My father replied with a thumbs up. There was her 10th birthday, where my mother wrote, "Tell her happy birthday from us," even though we had invited them to dinner 2 weeks earlier and she had said they were busy. I kept scrolling. The pattern was quiet enough to miss if I was only looking for one big wound. But it was there. My parents showed up when showing up could be seen. They stayed vague when love required privacy. The next afternoon, Daniel came by to drop off a casserole dish he had borrowed after Lily's birthday, dinner months before. He stood on the porch holding it with both hands, even though it was empty. "Got a minute?" he asked. Daniel was 32, younger than me by 4 years, and he had always been easier than my parents. Easier to laugh with, easier to forgive, easier to disappoint, because he often noticed things too late. I let him in. He set the dish on the counter and stayed standing. "Mom called me," he said. "About Thanksgiving?" He nodded. I waited. "She's upset," he said. "She thinks you're keeping Lily away." That sentence had become so familiar that I almost smiled. Not because it was funny, because it fit too neatly. "Did she mention why Lily might not want to come?" I asked. Daniel looked down at the counter. "She said Lily has always been hard to reach." I said nothing. "She said you take everything personally," he added, quieter. The refrigerator hummed behind us. A dog barked somewhere down the street. Daniel rubbed the back of his neck like he wanted the room to let him out. "She also said Aunt Carol has been asking questions," he said. There it was again, Aunt Carol. I leaned against the sink. What kind of questions? Why Lily isn't in most of the pictures. Why she never hears about her. Why Lily looked so uncomfortable at Mason's birthday. I remembered that birthday. Blue balloons, a grocery store cake, my mother suddenly bending down to fix Lily's hair before a cousin photo, touching her shoulder like she had always been tender with her. Lily standing stiff in the middle, unsure whether moving would get her corrected later. At the time, I thought Mom was trying. Now, I wondered who she had been trying for. Daniel shifted his weight. "Mariana," he said, "what happened between Mom and Lily?" The question should have comforted me. It meant he was finally asking the right persons. Instead, it made me tired. "Nothing happened," I said. "That's the problem." It was never one thing big enough for everyone to stop the room. Daniel frowned. I started naming small things. The photo where Lily had been asked to step aside. The stocking with no name. The birthday gifts that came without cards. The Easter egg hunt where she had to wait until the boys finished. The way Dad introduced Mason and Eli as his grandsons, then looked at Lily and said, "And this is Mariana's girl." Daniel's face changed slowly, not with shock, but with recognition arriving against his will. "I remember that," he said. "I know." He swallowed. "I didn't think. No one did," I said. That was not completely fair, but I let it stand. Daniel looked toward the hallway, where Lily's school shoes were lined neatly beside mine. For a moment, he seemed younger than he was. "Mom always made it sound like Lily didn't want to bond," he said. The words landed softly and still managed to cut. "How long has she been saying that?" Daniel did not answer quickly enough. I looked at him until he finally said, "Years." The kitchen felt smaller after that. Not because I was surprised my mother had defended herself. I knew she did that. I had watched her turn mistakes into misunderstandings and misunderstandings into other people's sensitivity. But this was different. While Lily was standing at the edge of family photos, my mother had been building another version of her somewhere else. A version where a child rejected kindness. A version where my parents were patient victims. A version that made every future exclusion look earned. Daniel left after apologizing in a voice that did not quite know where to place itself. That evening, I found Lily sitting on her bedroom floor with her old memory box open beside her. There were friendship bracelets inside, a school ribbon, 2 birthday candles she had saved for reasons I never understood, and a folded piece of notebook paper creased until the edges had gone soft. She looked up when I stopped in the doorway. "I wrote something once," she said. Her voice was calm, but her hands were holding the paper too carefully. "For Grandma Evelyn?" I asked. Lily nodded. I didn't give it to her. She unfolded it slowly and passed it to me. The first line was written in her 10-year-old handwriting, round and uneven. "I know I'm not invisible, because invisible people don't get told where not to stand." I read the first line twice. Not because I didn't understand it, but because some sentences change shape once you realize a child wrote them alone. Lily sat across from me on the floor with her knees pulled to her chest. Her room was dim except for the small lamp on her desk, the one with the crooked shade she refused to replace. Outside her window, the neighbor's porch light clicked on. Everything about the moment was ordinary, which made the paper in my hand feel heavier. "Do you want me to read it?" I asked. She nodded, so I did. It was not a letter filled with anger. That would have been easier to hold. Lily had written it like she was trying to be polite. Like she still believed there might be a correct way to explain her hurt so an adult would finally understand it. "Dear Grandma Evelyn, I know I'm not invisible, because invisible people don't get told where not to stand." I stopped there for one breath. Lily looked down at the carpet. I kept reading. She wrote about the Thanksgiving photo. She remembered the yellow dress I had bought her, and the way my mother had said, "Let's do one with just the real grandkids first." She wrote that she had stepped away before anyone touched her shoulder because she didn't want me to be embarrassed. That part made my eyes sting. I had spent years thinking I was protecting Lily from the worst of it. But even at 6, she had been protecting me too. She wrote about Christmas, the stockings on the mantle, Mason in red glitter, Eli in green, both boys laughing because Grandpa Richard had put candy canes in theirs before breakfast. Lily wrote that she had looked for her name and found a gift bag on the floor instead. I remembered that morning clearly. My mother had said, "Oh, I didn't know if she'd want one," as if a 6-year-old child might object to belonging. Lily wrote about my father, asking how long she would be staying with me. Not visiting. Staying. She wrote that she did not know the answer, so she said, "I think forever," and he only nodded. I looked up then. "Lily," I said quietly. "It's okay," she said, but it was not okay. The room knew it. The folded corners of the paper knew it. Her voice knew it. I read the next part more slowly. She wrote that Grandma Evelyn acted different when other people came over. She wrote that when Aunt Carol visited, my mother called her sweetheart and asked about school. When Aunt Carol left, Grandma Evelyn forgot again. She wrote that at family parties, my mother wanted her in the photo if someone else was taking it, but not if the picture was going on the hallway wall. Then came the line that made all the old moments connect. "I think you want me there when people are looking, but not when it is just us." I lowered the paper to my lap. For a while, neither of us spoke. There had been signs, I could see them now, lined up in a way they never had been before. The sudden warmth that crowded events. The silence between holidays. The way my mother's invitations became urgent only when Aunt Carol's name appeared. The way Lily was pulled close in public and left standing apart in private. It had never been confusion. It had been placement. My parents knew exactly where they wanted Lily, close enough to make them look accepting, far enough to keep her from feeling claimed. The next morning, I checked the old family photos on my mother's social media page. I didn't want to, but the thought had already taken root. Thanksgiving, Easter, birthdays, barbecues, years of smiling faces arranged under captions about family, blessings, and love. Lily was missing from most of them. When she was there, she was usually at the edge, half-turned, partly blocked by someone's shoulder. Once, at Mason's birthday, my mother had posted a cousin photo with Lily in the center. I stared at that one longer. The caption said, all my babies together. Under it, Aunt Carol had commented, so good to finally see Lily included. Finally, I sat back in my chair. That was when the pattern stopped being something I felt and became something I could point to. The calls from my mother had not started because Lily was missed. They had started because someone had noticed. Aunt Carol had noticed the empty spaces, the cropped photos, the way a child could exist in a family for 8 years and still seem like a guest. That afternoon, my mother called again. I let it ring. She left a voicemail, her voice sweet and controlled. Mariana, please call me back. We really need to settle Thanksgiving. Your father and I are trying, but you have to meet us halfway. Carol is already asking whether Lily will be there, and I don't want this to become a thing. I played it once. Then the message kept going. There was a rustle, a clink of dishes, and my father's voice farther away. Did she agree to bring the girl? My mother answered before the line cut off. Not yet. But Carol is watching, and I am not spending another holiday looking like the bad guy. I stood there with the phone in my hand, listening to the silence after her voice disappeared. The girl. Not Lily. Not granddaughter. Just the girl they suddenly needed at the table. I did not call my mother back that night. I wanted to. I wanted to pick up the phone and read every sentence back to her until she heard herself clearly. I wanted to ask my father why he could say the girl after 8 years of watching Lily grow taller at the edge of his living room. I wanted to ask my mother how many times she had practiced sounding hurt before she called me, but Lily was downstairs making toast. The sound of the knife scraping butter across the bread brought me back to the house we had built together. Our kitchen, our chipped plates, her homework spread across one side of the table, her sneakers by the door. A life where she did not have to wait for someone to decide whether she counted. So I waited. The next morning, after Lily left for school, I sat at the kitchen table with my phone, her letter, and the voicemail. The house was still. Outside, the trash truck groaned down the street. It was such a normal morning that I almost hated it. Some things should make the walls shake when they finally become clear. My mother answered on the second ring. Oh, thank God, she said. I've been worried sick. We need to talk about Thanksgiving before Carol starts making assumptions. There it was, not how Lily felt, not whether Lily wanted to come. Carol. I placed Lily's letter flat on the table and smoothed the crease with my fingers. We do need to talk, I said. My mother softened immediately. Good. Because your father and I have been very patient, Mariana. We love that girl. We've always tried to include her, that girl. Even while trying to prove love, she reached for distance. I asked her one question. Do you want Lily at Thanksgiving because you miss her, or because Aunt Carol is watching? For the first time, my mother did not answer quickly. Then she said, that is an awful thing to accuse me of. I'm not accusing you, I said. I'm asking because the dates line up. What dates? The invitations, the photos, the sudden concern. You call when Carol asks questions. You disappear when no one is looking. She made a small sound, almost a laugh, but there was no humor in it. You have always been dramatic about this. I looked at Lily's handwriting. I have the voicemail, Mom. Silence. The kind that has weight. Then her voice came back lower. That was a private conversation. So was what you did to Lily. She tried to speak over me then, not loudly. My mother rarely got loud when she knew she was losing. She became smooth, careful. She said adoption was complicated. She said she had never known what boundaries I wanted. She said Lily was quiet. She said children sometimes decide not to connect, and adults cannot force them. I let her talk. For years I had interrupted too early, corrected too soon, explained with too much hope. This time I waited until she ran out of softer words for the same old distance. Then I said, Lily wrote you something when she was 10. My mother breathed into the phone. She did? Yes. She never gave it to you. Mariana, I don't think. I started reading. I read the first line about invisible people being told where not to stand. My voice stayed steady, though my hand was pressed flat against the table. I read about the Thanksgiving photo, the stocking without her name, the gift bag on the floor, my father asking how long she would be staying, my mother correcting her in the pantry when she called her grandma. My mother whispered, that's not how it happened. But she did not ask me to stop, so I kept going. I read the part about Aunt Carol, about how Grandma Evelyn was nicer when someone else was there, about how Lily noticed she was pulled into pictures when relatives were watching and left out when the family was alone. Then I read the final line. I just want Mom to stop bringing me where I am only family when someone else might notice. After that, there was nothing. No apology, No denial, no careful explanation, only my mother breathing on the other end of the phone. For 8 years, she had managed the story by making everything small. A forgotten stocking, a misunderstood sentence, a shy child, a sensitive mother. But Lily's letter did not let the pieces stay separate. It put them in order. It showed the pattern plainly enough that even my mother could not soften it without sounding cruel. When she finally spoke, her voice had changed. "You're keeping her from us." "No," I said. "I'm keeping her from being used." Another silence. Then I said what I should have said years earlier. "Lily will not be at Thanksgiving. She will not be at Christmas. She will not be brought to any holiday where she is wanted for a photo more than for herself. If she ever chooses to see you, it will be because you have earned trust privately, not because Aunt Carol needs to see her at the table." My mother's breath shook once. "So that's it? That's what it is now." I ended the call before she could make me manage her feelings too. The consequences did not explode. They unfolded. Daniel called 2 days later. He said Aunt Carol had asked him directly why Lily was not coming. And for once, he told the truth. Not all of it, but enough. He told her Lily had not felt included. He told her mom had made things worse by pretending otherwise. Aunt Carol called me the next evening. She did not ask for gossip. She did not ask me to fix it before Thanksgiving. She only said, "I'm sorry I didn't ask sooner." That sentence stayed with me because it was the first adult sentence in years that did not ask Lily to carry the blame. My father sent one text. "Your mother is devastated. This has gone too far." I looked at it for a long time, then deleted it. My mother stopped calling for 3 weeks. When she finally texted, she did not ask about Lily's school, her concert, or whether she was sleeping better. She asked whether I still had the letter. I replied with one word, yes. Lily and I spent Thanksgiving at home. She chose macaroni and cheese, roasted chicken, and a chocolate pie from the grocery store because she said homemade pies always looked like they were judging her. We ate on the couch in pajamas, with a movie playing too loudly and a candle burning on the coffee table. Later, she asked if I was sad. I thought about my parents' dining room, the polished table, the framed photos, the empty place they had suddenly wanted her to fill. "A little," I said, "but not because we stayed home." She leaned her head against my shoulder. That was when I understood the part I had avoided the longest. I had spent years trying to convince my parents that Lily was real family, but Lily had never needed them to make her real. She had only needed me to stop taking her back to places where people treated her like a question. After that, holidays changed. Invitations became choices. My family became something people proved when no one was watching. My parents could apologize, repair, and learn how to know Lily without an audience. Or they could keep explaining why the chair beside them stayed empty. But they no longer got to call her their granddaughter only when the room was full. And they no longer got to decide where my daughter stood.